Hey, what's up, Baltimore investors? Today I have a real treat for you, actually. Is Rich from GeoTerra. He's an engineer who's going to be teaching you what you need to know about engineering for your renovation projects here in Baltimore City. So he obviously is licensed outside of Baltimore City, can work with you all throughout, but I am going to keep this pretty specific to this area as that is where I invest. So let's go ahead. We're going to talk about cost, how much you should expect, what to expect from your engineer, licensing, how to verify that, insurance required, protect yourself on all of this. We're going to cover all of that and more. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's talk to Rich now.
All right, let's do it, man. I'm excited.
Great work.
But yeah, so I guess really to your point, the biggest thing about, or I guess the crucial part to, I guess, investing in Baltimore and then working with an engineer, even though we're trying not to keep it general but really more specific to Baltimore, the idea is, some of these principles can actually be seen from a general standpoint. And that is, you want to get an engineer involved on your project sooner rather than later. A lot of investors
Before you even start.
Before you even start. Yeah. A lot of times, even as you're considering a property for purchase, a lot of folks or a lot of newbie investors, they typically get scared off from some of the properties that have structural damage because they think that, working with an engineer is going to be difficult or it's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
That's the biggest misconception, is that working with an engineer is expensive. But, there are great engineers out here that are willing to provide you the value that you need to your particular project, at a cost that makes sense to your bottom line.
Okay.
So the other thing is really also being able to choose and pick the right engineer.
Okay.
So with picking and choosing the right engineer, similar to, picking out your contractor, you want to make sure that they're licensed.
Yeah. So is that the same MHIC license that you hear about for contractors, but you're not, not the engineer needs to be licensed, but the contractor.
So when you're thinking about, when you're vetting your contractors, you're looking for them to be to the MHIC. But same thing for, your civil engineers, you're actually looking for them to have what's called a PE, their professional engineer license.
Got it. Okay.
And in Maryland, the way it works is, a Maryland PE can actually work on structural projects. They could work on HVAC, mechanical, civil, soils. I mean, a variety of different things. The issue is the onus ends up being on that particular engineer to disclose to you what it is that they're actually capable of doing. So you don't actually...
You don't know just by looking at the license.
Looking at the license. Exactly. Right. So myself, I'm a licensed professional engineer, and then my background, I have a geotechnical background, so that means soils, advanced soils, foundations, pavements, as well as structures. So I know I can do minor structural work, typical residential engineering, structural engineering work is within my wheelhouse. But if someone were to ask me that, hey, I have these electrical plans or these mechanical plans or plumbing plans, can you sign off on them? The answer is going to be no, because that's not what I'm actually licensed to be able to do. So,
well, I guess just in the sense of licensing, we're looking at this house now, and I mean, what licenses should I expect my engineer to have just to design this layout? I mean, I'm assuming nothing complicated, right?
Yeah, definitely nothing complicated. I mean, what you're looking for is someone with a Maryland seal and stamp. So that professional engineer's license, but you want to be able to do your diligence. So your due diligence. So the thing is to ask them, hey, do you have a background in structural engineering? Because the biggest thing is when you're dealing with, your residential structures, particularly with opening up walls, closing up areas, whether you're concerned about your floor system or your rafters, all those have to be sized appropriately based off of the actual dimensions of the home. So a lot of folks will think that like, okay, well, these existing, 2x6 rafters are spaced anywhere from 24 to 32 inches on center. So a lot of folks will see that and they'll say, okay, cool, I can just, if they're bad, I'll just replace them with,
sister
them, or replace them with 2x6s that are, dimensionally, commercially available now.
Yeah.
The issue is that a lot of people think that you can replace these true to dimension lumber that were milled from trees that, were allowed to grow for, decades at a time versus the newer lumber, which is now mass produced on farms, so they have a lot shorter of a lifespan. So the newer lumber is actually much weaker than the older lumber.
I was
structure.
told that.
Yeah. So a lot of times when you get contractors that come in, they're like, yeah, I'll just replace it with, 2x6s now, and we'll keep the same spacing, and it sounds good and it seems good. but in all actuality, it could potentially be structurally inadequate. So
Right, so now that we know all the different licenses and stuff, can you tell our audience, like, as far as insurance or even verifying, because I mean they can tell us,
Right.
but maybe we want to verify that you have these licenses.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about that. What should we expect?
Yeah, so with verifying your engineers, the biggest thing that you want to do is take a look at the Maryland Department of Labor and Licensing. So the Maryland Board for Professional Surveyors and Engineers, they have a direct website where you can actually look up a particular individual's license. So as long as you know their first and last name, you can actually look them up on the Maryland DLLR website to verify that they actually have a professional engineer's license.
And it'll show all the different certs or licenses that you have mentioned.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So if they're a licensed professional engineer, which is typical for your your civil engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, whatever engineer it is, we all take a similar exam. So we all take the same, first half of the exam is a 4-hour general exam, and the second half is actually your specialty. So whatever discipline that you want to be known for, or what is your particular level of competency, you have to be able to pass that exam. Now, the Maryland DLLR website doesn't necessarily tell you specifically what that particular engineer is licensed to do. It'll just tell you whether that person has a Maryland PE license and whether or not it's active.
Got it.
As well. So,
should we be worried about insurance? Let's say we, hire an engineer, and it's not done right, or I don't know. I mean, from my understanding, a lot of times when something's not done from an engineering perspective, it does take time for it to slowly crumble. So you maybe have a little bit of time to work with this, but like, is there any insurance we should consider? Or is it like we call someone that we can, like, kind of like the MHIC board, they have insurance for you to, like, is there something like that?
So not necessarily similar to that, but you can report them to DLLR. Okay. So it's the same website that you go to actually verify their PE license. You can actually report someone for, abuse of their license, working outside their competency, or for failed design work as well.
Okay. All right.
But the other part is definitely you also want to make sure that your engineer carries professional liability insurance as well as general liability insurance. And some will even go the extra step and carry bonding. That's something that we do. So we carry professional liability, general liability, as well as we maintain bonding as well. And the opposite side, as an investor, especially if you're getting into, new construction or just renovating in general, most hard money lenders, if you're using other people's money, they will require you to carry builder's risk insurance as well.
Okay. Yeah,
so you're going to want to make sure that there's multi-tiers to, being
insurance.
Protected into your insurances whenever you're working with any type of professional.
Especially structural work like this.
Yeah, especially structural work like this.
So a lot of investors are going to want to know about costs. Because you had mentioned, a lot of us think it's expensive. I actually try to avoid it for, I think, the beginning of my whole investing journey on this channel. So,
for sure.
But it actually didn't turn out to be, well, I guess it depends on what you're actually doing.
Correct.
I mean, for the lowest tier, we talk about what? Architectural drawings, which is what in your definition, what would you call it? It's like a layout, basically.
Exactly, yeah. Architectural drawings will simply just kind of get you a floor plan layout. Now, no disrespect to any of my architects out there. I actually work with a number of architects. They're phenomenal. They're great. And where I typically where we work hand in hand with our architects is the architects kind of come up with the artistic, the vision, right? The aesthetic side of things. And us as engineers, we're supposed to collaborate with the architects to make that vision a reality and make sure that's structurally sound and stable. So when
they're more concerned about like door sizes and but you're more concerned about, will this actually stand up?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Exactly. And that's in a very rudimentary sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a little more complicated.
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
New investors.
New investor level, so no disrespect to our technical professionals out there, particularly our architects. So they do amazing, phenomenal work. But from an investor, typically they're going to work with an architect or maybe even just a wicked CAD drafter who can come out with these floor plan layouts for them. And typically that's all you might need for your project if you're not planning on doing a lot of structural work. Usually you just need floor plan layouts. The only time when a structural engineer will typically become required is if you're adding structure to the house, whether vertically or horizontally, if you're adding on a deck structure, or if you want to create additional basement space by lowering the basement or digging out the basement.
So I hired a guy who did all the drawings by hand. It was probably about 3 sheets of paper. Pretty much was a 2D drawing that you had mentioned. I mean, there was a little 3D, but mostly that. and my permits got moved to the bottom of the stack, and I
Yep.
think it was like 2 months before anyone even looked at it, and then they just rejected it.
Yep.
So that's where I met Rich here. And so how many times have you seen bad architectural drawings get rejected by permit offices? Like, is that a common thing, or is that just my individual
No,
experience?
it's a very common thing, actually.
Okay.
We actually get calls all the time to actually take on, previous drafters or architects' work for that exact reason. A lot of times you'll get folks that might be able to promise you that, hey, we can get through with a hand sketch or a hand drawing. And, the success ratio of that is about less than 50%, to be honest. A lot of those folks that do make those types of promises, they're either one, lying to you, or two, they have a direct inside track with whoever's in the permitting office.
Yeah.
Whether or not you actually want to go that route or take that risk is 100% up to you. It's your prerogative, But
What about like really simple stuff like replacing one load-bearing beam or something like that?
yeah,
Would that get through with a hand drawn? Or
Yeah, and there have even been in some cases where I've seen that you don't even need to submit drawings for that. A lot of folks, what they'll end up doing is they'll actually apply for your typical interior residential alterations permit.
Okay.
And I believe Baltimore City allows you to replace up to 3 load-bearing beams or load-bearing wall sections with that permit, and the only thing that they ask for is an engineer's approval
Okay.
letter.
All right.
So that's also a little hack there as well.
Make the price a little bit cheaper if you're thinking
Right.
about
100%.
So I guess I've seen the prices range. I mean, for the cheapest I've ever gotten an architectural drawing from is about $1,000, and I think the most I've paid for a real complex set of drawings got up to like $6K, this sort of range. Like, and we're talking about a range here. This depends on what the services is, what we're providing, or not we, an engineer is providing. But for, I guess, let's kind of start on what we should expect here for an architectural drawing. Did I overpay on that? Did I underpay? $1,000? Kind of like what's the range you would expect for like let's say I don't know, 1,500 square foot, 3-bed, 2-bath row home in Baltimore City, just basic stuff.
Right. So you're pretty much in the right kind of like range. Essentially.
Okay.
For your 1,500 square foot home, I mean, anyone can expect that the starting rate will probably be about $1 per a square foot.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's usually about the starting rate. And then depending on what it is that, you plan on doing to that particular structure, if you're opening up walls and we need to design a load-bearing beam, that's going to increase the cost. If you're adding additional structure vertically or horizontally, that's going to tack on additional cost. Adding a deck, any type of those structural additions that you're planning on doing, or any time that you're planning on making the layout a little bit more complex from a structural standpoint, that's when the cost tends to kind of go up. So depending on what it is that you have proposed for that particular property and its intended final use and look, that can pretty much dictate the price.
Does the fact that it's a duplex or a triplex start to affect that cost?
It does. Because, when we put together the permit plans, for you, we have to make sure that we have the appropriate call outs in there. Because with a duplex property, one of the biggest things is make sure that you have the proper fire protection. So making sure that the walls and the ceiling structures are separate, are fire rated between the dwelling units, making sure that we're calling out the appropriate type doors, making sure that you have the appropriate type egresses. And all of that also comes with, working with an engineer and architect as well. Because a lot of times if you're working with a contractor, though they're amazing at what they do, they may or may not be well versed in the actual code. So working with an architect or an engineer who understands the building code as well as the building science, also is willing to work with you as well as your contractor. You guys can come to the table as a team from the beginning, and that way you can avoid some of these pitfalls during the actual construction process, or even before that, during the permitting process.
Yeah. So just curious, if anyone wanted to reach out to you, what number could they reach out to you on? What's your company's name and all of that?
Yeah, so I'm actually the principal engineer and owner of GeoTerra Engineering and Construction Consultants. So we're actually locally based here in Baltimore, Maryland. Our best way to reach us is you can visit our website online at www.geoterraec, that's the letter E as in Echo, C as in Charlie.com. Also, you can reach out to our office at 410-814-8747.
All right. So I've hired this guy on numerous occasions and love working with him. So so if you guys have any questions, comment below, let me know, or give him a call, and we will talk to you all very soon.